Excited to welcome Texas Tech head coach Krista Gerlich to the basketball podcast. Coach Gerlich is the head coach of Texas Tech Red Raiders basketball team, bringing a wealth of experience and a proven track record of success to the program. A former standout player for Texas Tech, Gerlich was a key member of the 1993 NCAA Championship team. Gerlich's coaching career began at high school level before she transitioned to college coaching. She served as an assistant coach at UTSA and Texas Tech, where she honed her skills under legendary coach Marcia Sharp. Her first head coaching role was at West Texas A&M, where she led the team to multiple Lone Star Conference titles and an Elite Eight appearance. In 2013, Gerlich took over as head coach at UT Arlington, where she became the winningest coach in program history with 121 victories. Gerlich returned to her alma mater in 2020, taking the helm of the Lady Raiders. Under her leadership, the team has shown steady improvement, reflecting her commitment to building a competitive and resilient program. With a career coaching record that includes over 347 wins, Gerlich's impact on women's college basketball is profound and far-reaching. Coach Gerlich, welcome to the basketball podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. It's going to be awesome to talk to you.
Yeah.
Great success as a player, great success as a coach at different levels. And Coach, let's start. How was it coaching at your alma mater where you won a national championship? That's got to be pretty cool.
It is very cool. A dream come true for sure. I know when I started this journey of being a collegiate basketball coach, that was the goal, right? Was to end up back at Texas Tech, just for a university that, in a program that did so much for me, not only as a player, but obviously throughout the years in my coaching career as well. So it's been fantastic. I'm not going to lie, it's been very hard. A lot of different components that add to that. Even just the state of the program that it was in when I got here was nothing like when we left it, that's for sure. So again, really hard. But what I've loved is just seeing and recognizing that Lubbock and Texas Tech and the surrounding region still has the same passion for Lady Raider basketball. And they are so excited about just what we're doing and the direction we're going, and just the thought of it returning to greatness is a fantastic thing. And it's just great to see all that support in this area.
Absolutely. And it's exciting, no doubt, to be back there coaching. And for me, a little bit just this time of year to add value for some of the coaches listening. A lot of coaches are transitioning back. Their kids are coming back to school. Your players are back at school. Talk to us a little bit about this period. You've gone through a summer phase with them, and now they're back on campus, getting ready to build towards the season. Can you talk a little bit about what you emphasize during this time?
Yeah, this is really a fun time for me. It's a really exciting. Everybody gets a fresh start. You did the hard work in the summer and kind of laid the foundation. So I think what's so great about it is now that we can do that, you give your kids a little break for them to refresh. And then now they come back and they're excited, but they're not quite as nervous because they know what to expect. Those first couple of weeks for your new kids, especially, it's hard because they're trying to get used to being away from home. You're throwing a bunch of new terminology at them. You're putting them through weight workouts that their body's never been through before. You're asking them to make public appearances and represent the brand and just all the things. And so it comes at them pretty quickly. And what's great about the summer is that we implemented that as a coaching profession years ago to get them acclimated on a less stressful time and even workload. There's not as much classes and things like that. So now you fast forward and you're back to the fall starting, and there's so many exciting things going on campus. At Texas Tech, we just had a big student walk that everybody walked down to the stadium and got to hear Joey McGuire speak. And it was like a big pep rally, fireworks, the whole thing. So getting everybody really excited about the school semester starting and football season starting. And the school spirit is just really contagious and very energetic on campus. And everybody has a little pep in their step. So it's just really fun to get the kids back on campus, get them back in the gym, and just see them be so excited about a fresh start.
No doubt about that. And it's got to be unique at a place like Texas Tech as well in terms of
Sure.
just that student experience. So, Coach, talk to us about the offseason then. Just give us an overview. Are you big focused on defensive install, offensive install in that offseason period, that summer period, or is it more player development focused? And of course, as we know, college basketball has changed so much with the number of newcomers and the transition for players. So talk to us about how you handled that phase first before we get into this phase.
Yeah, it has changed a little bit over the years because it's sometimes a little harder to get all your kids in now that there is so many transfers. We didn't get all of our kids in. We got all of them in except one. And we had trouble. She had to go home and work on her visa and had a little trouble with that because she's from France. And so it was the middle of the Olympics. So I guess the embassy was pretty busy. I don't know. But anyway, so it's hard because you don't have your entire team there and it fluctuates quite a bit for people. But we really try to do skill development during the summer. However, when I'm there particularly, and I try to be there every time we practice, but there's times with recruiting and things like that that I can't be, that we do try to install some things from our offense and our defense. What we did this year is we really tried to install our transition game and so that they could run and get some conditioning in a lot while they're on the court. We have them such a limited amount of time on the court that we try to want to get as much as conditioning in as we could as well. And it's a little bit more fun for them to play up and down. So we shot the ball a lot, tried to really just see what all of our new kids could do all at the same time. And then we ended up taking a week and we did all defense in 1 week and tried to instill as much as we could with our terminology and just philosophy, things like that, and it was really good. I didn't know how our kids would accept it really because it's the summer and it's, oh my gosh, she's already yelling at us about defense and who plays defense in the summer and that kind of thing. But I thought our kids handled it fantastic. I thought they were really locked in. And of course, that's one of the things that we hang our hat on is we try to really be known for our defense. And I thought our kids really bought into that. So there's a little bit of everything, but we shoot the ball a lot during the summer and really try to work on some mechanics and footwork.
Love it. And I was going to segue anyways into defense. So let's go there anyways, coach, because I know that's something that's been a big part of your program and your success over the years through all the different stops you've been at. But maybe take us through that week first, because I've heard other coaches talk about this, about just the mass install of that has a value because now you're ahead at this phase and they don't have to do some of that as much. So talk to us about that first. What are you starting with when you're installing your defense?
We legit start at the very basics. Like we really teach technique because I really try to convince kids that anybody can play defense and that we expect them to play defense and they really don't have an excuse not to because we're going to teach them angles and we're going to teach them footwork and just technique. So we literally break it down into how we do defensive slides and we do push pulls and we do run steps and we do a lot of really basic work to be able to get them to be as efficient as possible. And then we talk a lot about angles and in our philosophy of where we want to influence the basketball and where we want to refuse the basketball to go. And so we talk about that terminology and we divide the court up into quadrants and we talk about where we want to keep the basketball and how we keep it out of the middle. That's our philosophy. And we actually side the ball quite a bit. And so we talk a lot about that and we really challenge them to take it personally if they can't keep the ball out of the middle of the floor themselves. And then the other pieces of it, there's so many pieces to defense, but the off-ball defense, the next receiver, and then if you're 2 passes away, and then of course, if you're 3 passes away, we really break those things down and show them and try to just emphasize or introduce as many drills as we can that can teach that so they at least have it. They can see the whole method, what it's going to look like when you put it all together. It's super ugly early. And so as a coach, I've got to be like, okay, I'm not going to lose my mind in this 60 minutes that I have them on the court right now, but we're going to try to give great effort and to get to where they can at least understand concepts. And then we actually, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, we actually like to press as well. So I've started where we throw our press in before we even start teaching all the little half court defensive things, just so that they'll play hard and play reckless a little bit in the backcourt. And then when the ball gets across half court and it gets down into the 3-point line, we settle in and try to play really solid defense.
That's interesting to hear. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So connecting, you install transition, you install press, because to a certain extent, that's fun to play in the offseason, but also that double connection with conditioning that you mentioned already. I was just going to come back to the technique part. You mentioned angles. I know this is a common question from many coaches in terms of stance on the ball and influencing it in a certain direction, as opposed to opening up too much in terms of that influence. So can you talk a little bit more detail about the technique of actually covering the ball and influencing it?
100%. Yes. So we always want our feet parallel to a sideline if the ball's out of the middle of the floor, or we want it parallel to the half court line if the ball's in the middle of the floor. And so our feet are parallel, but whichever direction we're influencing them, you're just like a half a step out. I don't know what that's called, but like just one foot in front of the other, about a half a step. We try real hard on a scouting report as well to know dominant hands. So if you do catch somebody at the front, at the top, and you don't know which way to influence them because they're not out of the middle, then we're going to influence them to their least dominant hand and try to keep them from going with their dominant hand. So at the top, most of the time, you're going to influence them left. And you're exactly right. That does not mean to drop your foot and to open up. We keep our shoulders square, our shoulders parallel, our feet parallel, and we divide the floor up into quadrants. So it's the top two quadrants are 1 and 2, and the bottom two are 3 and 4. And your job is to keep the ball in your quadrant. So if they're trying to if you have them in quadrant 1 and they're trying to go to quadrant 2, you're trying to keep them out of the middle of the floor. If they're trying to go to quadrant 3, you're trying to cut them off before they get to quadrant 3, because we're trying to keep them farther away from the basket. If they're in quadrant 3, then our feet are going to be parallel to the sideline, and we're trying to influence to the baseline. And so if they go to the baseline, we are trying to cut them off before we ask for help. And then if they spin back to the middle, then we're trying to cut them off before they get in the middle of the lane. So we do a lot of drills that are competitions that are points. Like my favorite one is points in the paint. And you're trying to keep the person with the basketball out of the paint. And that can be even just a foot. So it's kind of fun when you play. Kids figure out that they can get a point if they can just somehow get their foot in the paint, and they literally are pushing their foot, like holding the ball and just like dancing back and forth with their foot. And the defense is looking at me like, the ball's not in there. And I'm like, but the foot is. Find a way to keep them out. Like, you don't have them enough out. Keep them out farther. So really physical, really try to teach them how to be physical and to be a wall. But yeah, we try real hard to keep parallel to a sideline or the half court line for our stance.
So the quadrant idea, connect that for us a little bit deeper then. How, because I imagine, again, from a player's perspective, it's a pretty easy way to be able to visualize what you're trying to accomplish defensively. So then how do you maybe connect it to analytics or different things like that helps hold them accountable to doing that? So within practice and within games.
Yeah, when we grade film, we don't let them go middle, or you get a negative if you're guarding the ball and your man goes middle. So anytime you close out on a skip pass, anything like that, like we are closing out high side and we are keeping them from getting around us to the middle of the floor. Because in my opinion, if they can get to the middle of the floor, they can see all their options. Whereas if they're going to the baseline, they are limited to where they can see their options because the defense is on that top shoulder. So grading film is a lot. We read, sometimes that might be our defensive emphasis of the day is no middle. And every time the ball goes middle, we stop and do some type of consequence, or it might be the other team's ball even. I think what we have found is that if the ball hits the paint, if the other team gets paint touches, good things happen for them. And that's the same thing for us on offense. We try to get paint touches. And if we're not getting paint touches, we're not being near aggressive enough. And a lot of times we'll say you have to get a paint touch before you can shoot the 3, because we're wanting to collapse the defense. And so whenever we look at film and grade film and even look at our opponents, we want to see where they're getting their shots and who's getting to the paint. And sometimes we'll overhelp on one particular person if they are really good at getting to the paint. And our job is just to flat out keep the ball out of the middle of the floor or out of the paint.
Love that. And the points in the paint defensive drill is obviously a defensive emphasis, but yes, by nature, by what you said, it's also an offensive emphasis for you as well. Absolutely. Is that a one-on-one drill, and do you ever build it up in terms of small-sided game, or what is it in terms of that?
So yeah, we can do a lot of things. Points in the paint is actually a 4-on-4 drill, or it can be a 5-on-5 drill. It can be whatever you want it to be, but we do break some things down. In fact, almost all of my practices. If you came to my practice, you would see us do some part method defense first and do break down some drills. And then we would do a whole method defense and put it together because there's so many pieces and there's so many things they have to think about. We try really hard to concentrate on one or two things at a time and then put it in the whole method and then just concentrate on those two things within that whole method as well. But there's a drill that we do at the top of the key and we put cones on each elbow and we'll throw it's just one-on-one and we'll throw the basketball to them, to the offense. And the offense is trying to get to the paint or the basket inside those cones. And the defense is trying to just keep them from getting to a cone. And it just shrinks the floor for them so that they can see that like you're not going to be able to keep somebody from going from the top of the key to a baseline necessarily. You can do a great job at it and a quicker person is going, but if you can get them in the area, then we can get you some help. But if they can go straight line drives on you, we're screwed. So we really work on that push pull and a kick out to where we're moving our body in front of them and not trying to grab them with our hands or obviously opening up with our feet.
Explain maybe more your push-pull terminology. I've used that for offense to be able to describe penetration reaction, but I think you're talking about it in a different context.
Yeah. So when we get down in a stance, obviously we get in a wide stance, we slap the floor like old Bobby Hurley used to do. Love it. We yell stance, we yell defense and the kids are slap the floor. And whatever direction they're going. So we're in a wide stance. We tell them to get wide first. So a lot of kids want to come together first. And instead, like we want them to get wide with this foot that they're going. So whenever and you can't get much wider, right? Because you're already in a wide stance. So you're literally going to kick your foot out and it's going to go probably 12 inches. And when you kick it out, it pulls you. And when it kicks you out, it pulls you. And when it kicks you out, it pulls you. And so it's push, pull, push, pull, push, pull. So you're pushing off, right? And pulling. And so your feet never come together because when you get small and your feet come together, that's when you get off balance and that's when someone can get around you. But if you have a wide stance at all times, you're moving your body and your wide frame to keep it in front of the ball.
Coach, I love doing the podcast because I see people like yourself get so into talking about technique and tactics, and it's beautiful. And thank you for that depth because that really did add a great understanding for all of us. Awesome. And now, but maybe connect it for the off the ball defense. So one pass away help, and then maybe even with that, a little bit of the adaptability of the defense. Because you mentioned sometimes you're forcing weak hand and certainly off the top and everything like that. So does that make the help off the ball adjust a little bit depending on where you're forcing as well?
100%. I would say that every game we play, you make tweaks to your defense just like you do your offense. And you've got to overhelp in some spots. In the perfect world, we want to play one-on-one basketball and we don't ever want to ask for help. But it's not a perfect world and it's not going to happen. So we got to make sure that we have our different lines of defense in. And so off the ball defense, if you're one pass away, we play on the line, up the line. And so we've got our hand in the passing lane, our body's not in the passing lane. We don't want to have our feet above the line of the ball because we don't want to get beat back door. I always say what scores, and we want to keep people away from the basket, not behind us where we have to ask for help. So we play hand in the passing lane, up the line, on the line. But when your man moves, we get closer to them so that when they do get below us, we can jam them and make them, and we have physical contact so they make them go behind us. I am not, and this is to each their own, right? Everybody has their own philosophy, but I'm not a turn your head to whip it around. And I'll tell you why I'm not, because when I played, Cheryl Swoops and I mastered the backdoor pass. And I didn't care if people turned their heads. If they turned their heads, I still got them because we were going underneath them. If you turn your head, you're still up high, right? You're still up high and the ball can get underneath you. But if you get below them and jam them, you're always between them and the ball. And I just like physicality. I don't want the offense to go where they want to go. I don't like straight line cuts. So we're going to hit people when they try to cross our face or when they go behind us or anything like that.
I just want to build on that because that to me makes sense, because when you're covering a cutter, essentially you don't have help responsibility at that point anyways.
Correct. Correct. Yes. So you're concerned about your man. So you need to be stuck to them when they get below you. We don't want you to hug up to your man out on the perimeter when the ball's at the top and your man's on the wing. Like we're trying to close the gap, right? We're trying to shrink the gap. We're trying to get in the gap so that the ball handler doesn't see an open driving lane. But when our man moves, we got to move at an angle to be able to meet them. And again, when they go through the lane, anytime anybody's going through the lane, they better have a body on them. They better have somebody stuck to them, pushing them around. So it's not a straight line cut. And then whenever we are playing midline ball or 2 or 3 passes away, we go off of the midline. So we're either going to be 1 step ball side or 1 step girl side. So if my man is on the wing opposite of the ball and the ball's above the free throw line, then I can be closer to my man because the ball's farther away from the help side, right? But when the ball gets lower, I got to be closer to the ball because the ball's what scores. So if the ball is below the free throw line, I'm going to be 1 step ball side. So I'm going to have 1 foot on midline and my other foot is on ball side. So that when the ball drives, if it beats the first defender, I can run step and get to help quicker. Plus I have other people in midline that can help me with my man. Does that make sense? So then if the ball's above the free throw line, I can be closer because if they throw a skip pass, then I can get there faster.
Yeah.
If that makes
So
sense.
it's all relative to space and distance, relative to your
Yes.
check and relative to the ball.
And as the ball's moving, as the ball's driving, I'm moving. I'm not staying in one spot. And then we say that if we don't have to go help, we don't want to go help. So if our teammate is guarding the ball and you can tell and that they don't need help, then you should be talking to them and saying, you got it, or I'm in help, but stay there, whatever, you got it. But as soon as you see that they're beat, then we expect the help side to use their run step, which is a step, run, square up, right, to get to spot 1. And our job as a help defender is to keep the ball out of the paint. So we don't even, like when they put the arc in, we never said, hey, get your feet outside the arc. We say, get your feet outside the paint. So there is no question to the referee if you're in that arc or not. And besides, our philosophy is to keep the ball out of the paint, not out of the arc. Now we don't have the arc again, so we can't decide what we want to do there as a professional. But so that's how we move on that rotation. And then it all depends on where your man is and if you're spot 1, spot 2, or spot 3 help. So if you're in help and you're the lowest man and the ball is getting beat to the basket, the ball's getting to the basket, then I'm going to spot 1. The next highest person is going to drop to spot 2 to cover my man or the basket. Spot 3 is going to be the highest one, and they're going to open up and dive to the lane, and they've got the first pass out back to the top. So essentially, spot 3 is covering 2 different people. And so if it comes right back out to their man, everybody recovers. But if it goes cross court, then the spot 3 is going to take that man, and we're all going to match up accordingly. Like you're not going to go back to your man on a cross court pass. We're going to X out of help to cover all the ground.
I was going to ask you about that part because one of the things that obviously is a big emphasis for you is that 1 pass away help. You're okay with them fully committing to help because the priority is to keep them obviously out of the quadrant, out of the paint, different things like that. Even if they full help with their full body, then you're still in rotation off the ball to be able to support them and help them. And is that a bluff and recover or is that a help and recover in terms of the teammate helping them?
Okay, so if it depends on where the ball is, because if you're next receiver, like if you're next receiver and you're 1 pass away, you're not the one that's going to help. Like you're in the gap and you will bluff and get back, but we are never going to go in the gap up top and go first pass and go completely help because nobody can get out to the shooter.
That clarifies it, Coach. That's what I thought. So the help primarily is at the rim if you can.
That's
but
right.
Again, not at the rim because you're defining paint. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. And so let's just take the corner, right? Because the corner is a really hard spot because you want to help off the corner. Naturally, you want to help off the corner. So if the ball's at the lane line, let's say the ball's at the top on the lane line and maybe even over a little, like a 2-guard spot, and your man's in the corner. You're going to be up the line in the gap to just shrink the floor so that there's not a huge gap right there for that guy to just rip past the on-ball defender. So if they do a good job and keep them out of the lane line, which is the push-pull part, and you're trying to send them to that sideline, then we're going to get closer to our man as the ball gets closer. If they get completely beat, we're just going to bluff and we're going to go back to our man, and spot one is going to come from midline, like even across to the lane line, they're going to come across, and we're going to dive on the backside, because I cannot stand 1-pass threes, like down the lane line and you come help and you kick out to the corner, because nobody can get there. And in fact, if you go back and watch the 2019 Texas Tech men's team, they lost the national championship because they helped off the corner 3 and didn't need, I think they were down 3 or whatever. All they had to do is they didn't give up a 3. They shouldn't have given up a 3. But they helped off the corner. And that 1-pass 3 is just.
Having coached AAU basketball over the last year, I can tell you, like, as much as I'm trying to teach my teams to spray it to the weak side to get ready for that next level of being able to attack the weak side off the dribble, every team basically helps off the ball side. So it becomes such an easy pass to a certain extent as well. So I understand the instinct at a very young age is you're learning to help off the ball side all the time.
Yes.
And I don't know if coaches could change that. That would help coaches at Coach Gerlich's level, not have them help off the ball side. It is amazing in that sense. How are you covering the post then to connect all this for coaches?
Yeah, I love it. So I love post defense, and I'm a big believer that if you're going to pressure out and try to deny passing lanes and try to keep pressure on the ball, then why would you stand behind the post and let them catch it anytime? So we have a drill called 6-point, and we 6-point our post. And so you start at high side when the ball's in the middle of the floor. You're on your own. When the ball's in the middle of the floor, you're on your own. You do not let the ball enter. When it goes to the wing, we step across in full front and we are pushing back. And we have a 3-level defense right here where we have to have ball pressure, we're fronting the post, and we have to have backside help. And so we really try to emphasize to our post players that, yes, we're fronting the post and we expect them to not get pushed off the block really far. Like, they have to be smart and work really hard with their feet. But we have to have ball pressure and we have to have backside help. Like, we're not expecting them to keep the ball from entering the post all by themselves. But we are expecting them to work extremely hard to not let there be a direct pass in. So they'll go full front. If the ball goes to the corner, they step back through and they get low side. If it was to skip back to the top, they spin around to get back to the middle so the ball can't enter directly. So we never want to go all the way around, like on a skip pass from the corner back to the top. You never want to go all the way around because they're going to have a middle post speed, a high-low, which we run some high-low on offense. So it's really easy for me to explain to the kids why we don't want to do it, because that's how we score a lot, was to get that. So we're like, okay, you got to be able to guard your own offense. The other piece of that is they have to be smart about keeping them off the block. So when they get to low side, they got to push them up off the block. And this is a playing that not very many people teach this, but when there's a baseline drive, when you have a ball side post and there's a baseline drive of any type, we do not help off of that post. We bring it from the backside, which is very consistent with if they drive down the lane line, right? If there's an open post and they drive down, we're going to come from the backside to help. We're doing the same thing here, because if you step off the post, there's nobody to rotate to the post. And so that little drop pass to the post player bucket every time you go baseline, like, it drives me insane. And so super hard to teach kids to do, because it's really, you got to trust your teammates, because when you're low side on the post, ball side, and the ball's coming and you're pushing up, you look like a fool if they go shoot a layup and you don't help. So you've got to have some backside help that's going to help you. And it just makes perfect sense. So it really turns into still 4-on-4 shell, right? With your post player is just, you're manned up with your post player. Because if you'll go back to that very first thing I was talking about, when you have a cutter, I said, if anybody's in the paint, you better have the body on them. A post player's in the paint. And so you're trying to keep them out of the paint and off the block. but they take one step, they're going to be in the paint. They got to have a body on them or they're going to get a wide open layup.
Okay, so two things. It strikes me as, especially covering cutters, which is part of the modern game, just people cutting drives and people cutting off ball screen, different things like that. That simplifies it for someone knowing that they're not responsible for rotation. They're responsible for the cutter, just like your post rules. The other thing you already said, which I was going to connect, is like you're essentially just making it form for rotations all over the floor,
Yep.
which is what I've always talked about when there's a high post, is like the high post is not involved in rotation. So it makes sense. Build it a little bit more for us, because I know the challenges of trying to get a player to understand that. But talk to us maybe about that weak side player's positioning relative to that, to be able to get outside the lane and to have that, obviously, that just aggressive decision, as you said, to get outside the paint and help.
So we do a lot of see ball, see girl. We actually have a drill that's a 2-on-2 drill. That's a see ball, see girl, and it's all off. Everything's off ball. And you constantly have to have your head on a swivel, because you have to see ball, see girl at all times. And there's a lot of kids that can't do the peripheral vision thing. That's what we were taught, is find a spot in the middle and you can see both of them. But I'm like, kids just don't do that. Now we have a lot of kids that ball watch, and we have a lot of kids that hug up to their man. And so we're like, you got to find a happy medium. So if you'll get your head on a swivel and constantly see ball, see man, and talk. And if you're talking, then you can see it, because there's going to be sometimes that some people switch on you when you're looking at the ball. And when you look back, your man's up here and their man's down here, and y'all are still in the same spot. So you can talk about, hey, you got my man now, I got yours. Maybe. I don't like to do that, but there's always going to be cases, right, where you can switch, but they have to constantly be moving. And so that see ball, see girl drill is so good, because they have to move up the line, up the midline, and maneuver around each other. And again, really small details that are real particular about. In that see ball, see girl drill, the ball's over here on the wing, right? And then we've got two offensive players out on the wing in the corner, and we're in help. So if the ball's above the free throw line, we're one step girl side. If the ball's below the free throw line, we move over one step and we're one step ball side. Now our people move. Okay. When they interchange, the lowest person is going to go up ball side, because they can see the ball, right? The person that man is dropping down, they need to just drop straight down, because they're moving backwards. They can't see. So it doesn't make any sense for them to turn around and go, hey, move, because they don't even know anybody's going to be back there, first of all. So the person below them needs to be saying, like, drop, I got you, and switch spots or whatever. And they come around and they're constantly talking. So now, as on that rotation, as that's happening, if the ball drives and this is the rotation and I'm below my teammate, now I'm going to spot one, and this top one's dropping to spot two. Then when they pull the ball back out, they reload, they run step back to midline and find their man, and then they're down in a stance ready to go again. So we're doing all of this without a post player. Then if you put a post player in, you're still doing the same thing, as long as the post player is on ball side, because we're saying, like, you're not going to ask that post player to help off at any time. These two people at midline can do that. And plus it's a little discombobulated in there too. But now let's go a step further. Now let's say that the ball's over on this side of the floor. Okay. And your post player is on opposite ball side block. Now they're in help, right? Their man, if you're guarding the post, you're in help. So now it's a matter of, I'm in this rotation. My man just happens to be on the lane line. So I could still go to spot one now, and then spot two would drop in front of my man on the block, if that makes sense.
It does, and it helps us understand the whole of this, which is beautiful
Yes.
as well. Ball screen coach, which is another part of the modern game. So many ball screens. So talk to us about how this connects to that philosophy.
Yeah, so many ball screens. And I'm going to tell you, the ball screens are still, I think that's all coaches' biggest nightmare, was like, how do you do it? And we have several ways that we do it. We teach, if it's guard to guard, we just teach to fire, which what we say fire, that's switch. So a lot of times if they're likes that are screening each other, they can switch, but they got to talk. But fire is not just switch. Fire is hot. There's a reason that it's called fire. So if you fire, you are firing it to get them to go back across the screen so we can get back to our matchup.
Sending
So
it back where it came in terms of the.
yes, you're trying to, like, because if you're just switching,
Yeah.
like, we're going to come together. But then if you're the man that is switching onto the ball, we want you to attack it. And this man is getting underneath the screen. So now if you attack it and they go, oh crap, I don't want to do that. They turn back around, then we switch back. And now we're staying on our original matchup. So that's the easiest thing. I would really like to get to where, and I think we might be there this year, is where we're athletic enough in the post that our posts can guard guards as well. And that I think that we're big enough on the perimeter that our perimeter players can guard the posts. So I would love to get where you just switch all ball screens, because that really makes it difficult to run that if you don't have any mismatches.
It simplifies it so much for your team.
Oh
too.
my gosh. Yeah. So that's the perfect world. That would be the first option that we want to make happen. Another thing that we've done before that we were really successful at it when I was at West Texas A&M, and I think it's because at that level, the ball handlers weren't quite as elite as they are in Division I Division I. So we would trap ball screens, and we call that blitz. And anytime there was a ball screen, we would just trap the mess out of it. And it actually would rotate us into a 2-2-1 press, in a half court setting, which I loved because it created some havoc. We do that occasionally. That we don't do it very often at this level, but we will do it occasionally, especially if there's somebody that's really a great shooter off the ball screen and we want to get it out of their hands. We'll just go trap them to get it out of their hands. But I will say that any ball screen that's towards the baseline, we absolutely blitz. Like, that's just our rule. No matter how we're guarding ball screens, if it's a baseline screen on the wing, then we blitz it because they're going to the corner, and we try to use the sideline and the baseline, and we just try to trap them as hard as we can to get a turnover there. So sometimes that's just a natural rule that we do. And then probably my favorite way, we will hedge and go under some that I'm just not crazy about that all the time. I think it gets, when you put your big man outside the 3-point line hedging, there's bad things that can happen, in my opinion. And so I just am not very comfortable with that. It's probably my comfortability level more so than whether our kids can do it or not. I'm just not comfortable in it. So a lot of times we will ice ball screens. That's probably my favorite way to ice them. We've had to ice probably the past, since I've been at Tech, to be honest, is because we didn't have the bigs that were athletic enough to do any of the others. And so instead of dragging our bigs out to the 3-point line, we would ice it, and they would get in the line of the drive between the ball and the basket, and we would keep them from going over the top of the screen, which technically, if you're icing it, that falls right into our philosophy of not letting the ball go middle. So that's probably our favorite thing. Only thing I really struggle with that is, as I tend to think that it allows your bigs to get lazy. If they're not out there and really get in a stance and really guard the ball, they can get attacked pretty easily if they get lazy doing that. So we try real hard not to start with icing. We try to add icing in as a scout.
Yeah, I've heard that from other coaches in terms of drop and ice, is that sometimes the big gets disengaged in their responsibilities. But that's great to give us that outline. And then generally when you get into, let's say, especially into conference play, you've gone through this phase of kind of figuring out best ball screen strategies for this personnel, this group on the floor. So then are you going into games with a specific ball screen strategy for the whole opponent, or are you going in specifically for different ball screen coverages based on matchups and different things?
Definitely depends. It definitely depends on the personnel and what they like to do. Most of the time, we have a plan A. If this is how we're going to attack ball screens, and this is how we're going to defend them. And then, but we always have a plan B, so that if we don't like the way it looks, sometimes our plan might be the first 5 minutes, we're going to guard it this way. And then at the media timeout, we're going to switch. And then at the quarter timeout, we're going to switch. And then meaning switch defenses of how we're going to guard it. That way, especially early, it allows us to see what they do to it, so that we could make adjustments at halftime. So we will We definitely have a plan going into it. Now, as I said earlier, if there's personnel that is really good in ball screens or really good shooter, or maybe let's just be honest, like Taylor Robertson that played for OU could shoot the absolute mess out of the basketball. She was such a problem. And so we always tried to just get the ball out of her hands as quickly as possible because she was in range as soon as the ball hit her hands, no matter where it was. It really just depends on personnel as well.
Love it. And connect this for us with the pressure. You mentioned pressure at the beginning when we talked about season planning and installing a little bit in the summer. So how does this defensive philosophy you just outlined connect to the full court pressure? A lot of similar rules, similar philosophy?
Yeah, we like to run and jump. And so I like to have ball pressure from the get-go. We actually have kind of a series of defenses that we can run if we start in a man so that we can get them to start dribbling the basketball down the floor, and then we'll switch into a run and jump. So now they're dribbling, but now we can get a little pressure on them, get them to a sideline, try to get two people on the ball. If they get used to that, then we can come and run and jump and we can stay in the trap. So we'll start out man, then we can run and jump and we can stay in the trap, and it'll rotate into that combination press I was talking about. And then we can even go straight zone press where we go a trap immediately and we have people in their spots and run a traditional 1-2-1-1 or something like that. But I just love to have pressure on the ball. And obviously with a shot clock that allows us to take a little time off the clock, especially if teams are really good and difficult to defend in the half court. So it just keeps us from having to guard like a motion offense or something like that for 30 seconds. Maybe they only run it for 20 or whatever the case may be. Even teams that run bunch of sets, if you can keep them from getting into their set, and then maybe they just have one opportunity to run a set instead of, I'm going to run this set, didn't work, now here's another set. Because now that's two sets in one possession that you got to know, that you got to be able to scout. So anything that we can do to just disrupt and slow them down. But also, I think it's, if you're deep enough, which we're going to be this year, and we were last year until we started getting injured, it's another area that your opponent has to prepare for. So they have to be concerned about your press, and they have to take time out of their scout for how are they going to break your press. And they may break it early. They may break it the whole first half, but like at some point, you may catch them off guard. You may catch a substitute in the game. You may catch them being complacent, and it transitions into an easy bucket, or it gets you an extra possession. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for deflections, and we're looking for extra possessions. And so that's all that we do in the backcourt. Like we do those things in the backcourt. When the ball crosses the half court line, if they're under distress, then we're going to keep pursuing to maybe trap or jump. But if they have the ball across the half court line and they are composed and patient, whatever, then we're going to lock in and we're going to shift down just a little bit, and we're not going to gamble so much. And now we're going to pressure, but it's going to be more in our half court defense and the rules that all we just went over earlier.
Love it. Love how you connected to it. Just philosophically, I think what shines through here is adaptability on defense. And that's changed a lot over the years of coaching for both of us, I know. So talk to us a little bit about connecting this to practice. You mentioned doing some drills and different things like that, but doing this traditional repetitive defensive type practice doesn't help them be as adaptable as they need to be based on what you're saying. So can you connect how you take those drills to application to transfer to the game?
Yeah. So again, we do a bunch of part method, right? Where, and it's always competitive. Like we do a bunch of breakdown part method drills, and then.
So not scripted. These are live drills.
Yeah.
Where people can score, and there's certain emphasis with it competitively.
Yes,
That's what I mean.
absolutely. Yeah. We will do something that like we'll have a goal of something, like even that see ball, see girl drill that we're doing. We can go offense versus defense, and you got to get 3 stops before, who can get 3 stops first, or 3 stops in a row, or anything like that. So it's very live, competitive, so that it's not just, now I'll say early we have our practice players probably run the drill, and it's more methodical, like just to make sure that they can get where they're supposed to be. And we're
To learn the
teaching.
technique, to learn the tactics. Once they've got that, then apply them.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we start speeding up, speeding up. And then when you get into conference play, we still do those breakdown drills, but it's more like, here's 3 minutes on the clock. Let's everybody get through it and don't let the ball get to the paint. If the ball gets to the paint, we're starting over, whatever. But if y'all can do it this quick in 3 minutes, then 3 minutes, we're moving on to the next thing. It's just a refresher. It's to stay crisp. It's to stay locked in. And especially if there's something that our opponent's going to do that really, really attacks that. So if it's a ball screen, or if it's a post feed, or if it's an off ball screen of some sort, like we will drill that to make sure we know how to guard it. And then we put it all together and have to guard it within our 5-on-5.
That's beautiful. Thank you for connecting that for us. It gives us a great visual of what your practices look like,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. And see ball, see girl. I love that phrasing. Great. I'm going to come back to the question. You said you playing with shell swoops determined this is my philosophy on defending backdoors because
Yes.
we were so good at this. And I
Yes.
just love that. I mentor a lot of former players who are moving into coaching. And that's one of the things that I talk about with them. And I'm curious your philosophy on this. I just simply ask them, what made sense to you? What didn't make sense to you from what you've been coached? And obviously they played for multiple different coaches usually by the time they're going into coaching. Is
Yeah.
that somewhat similar to have your philosophy evolved?
Oh, no doubt. There's no doubt about that. My dad was my coach in high school. So I grew up learning from one of the best, in my opinion. And then, so a lot of things that I learned from him, I still do to this day, have the same philosophy. I coached at UTSA for Terry Gray for a little while. He was a very disciplined defensive coach. So a lot of our defensive drills, even though it was the same philosophy from high school, when I played it, they were more scripted in the drills that they did and broke them down more. And so I really, really liked that piece of it, and just how adamant he was on making defense it was non-negotiable. This is how you're going to do it. And you're going to win this battle. And so I really loved learning that piece of it. And then obviously with Coach Sharp, we actually ran a 2-3 zone when I played. And so I know how to coach a zone really well as too. And when we need a zone, which when I first got here, I didn't have my players in, so they definitely weren't where they could full court press and where they could switch picks and things like that. So we had to play some zones. And I am not a stubborn one that says, oh no, we run man, so this is what we're running. If I need to zone somebody to win a basketball game, we're going to zone somebody. If we need to jump into a triangle and 2 at halftime because 2 kids are just absolutely killing us, then we're going to adjust and we're going to jump in that triangle and 2, and we're going to do whatever we have to do to win it. But in a perfect world, I would love to be able to play our man-to-man defense. No questions asked. This is what we do. I just think that there's a lot of ways that you have to adjust throughout that. And man-to-man particularly, I just really loved the success that we had. And I love that we use the word dictate and dominate a lot. We use that phrase. And I just love that because I am one of those that I want to keep the other team from scoring. And as much as we want to score, it just ticks me off every time the other team scores. And it's like a game. That's a game within a game for me. Yes, I take a lot of those things. Same thing on offense. When I played, Swoops and I, like I said, mastered the backdoor pass. And so we teach that immediately with our kids, because to me, that's something that you should be able to adjust and do out on the court naturally because of the way people are playing you. Like, why are you turning the ball over when they're pressuring the wing? Like, why do we keep trying to throw it to the wing when they're denying? Set them up, but you've got to also get everybody up high. You've got to know how to set people up, and you got to be on the same page. The high-low offensive stuff that we do was from when I played at Tech. We were really good at it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I've watched Stanford run it for years as well, and even Kim Mulkey runs a lot of high-low stuff or post-oriented things, and it just makes sense to me. And when you have a big, I really truly believe inside out. And I was a 3-point shooter. My name is still in the record books for threes and things like that. So I love to shoot the 3 ball, but I really do believe as a coach that a post player needs to touch it, or it needs to get a paint touch before you shoot it. Cause let's get some high percentage shots early. and then open up the 3-point shot for us. So there's a lot of philosophy things throughout all that yes, that I did as a player, and then obviously through my coaching career that I learned a lot from a lot of coaches.
I loved it. And I know we focused on defense here, Coach, but I love that you teased a little bit of offense for when you come back sometime. We can go into the offense, but just great depth on the defense and the technique, the tactics, and our understanding of what you do. Before we go, I know you texted me about this, and I looked it up when you texted me, and this is pretty cool. Patrick Mahomes, Adidas signed Texas Tech athletes to NIL deals, just the support of someone like that and the involvement of someone like that. Talk about that kind of as an overall thing for your university.
Yeah, I just think it's in this day and age with the transfer portal, I think it's so hard for kids to develop a love for the school that they go to. And that to me is a crying shame, to be quite honest, because the rivalries are because of that. Right? The rivalries are because you go to a school that you love and you want to defend it. And so it's very rare now that you've got people that will stay at a school for 4 years, or when they do stay and they get their degree, that's fantastic. But then to have somebody of Patrick Mahomes' caliber and the world he lives in now and the athlete that he's become and the stage that he's on, for him to come back to his alma mater, in which he was not at the peak of his game at. It's not like he won a national championship here. It's not like he even won a Big 12 championship here, but he loved his experience and he loves the people and he loves the school and he's giving back to it. And it's only going to help us. It's incredible for us to be a part of Team Mahomes and obviously just the Adidas brand too. We're so excited about that partnership, but for him to be able to show our athletes what it's like to come back to your alma mater and give back to what he credits a university for giving him. Like he credits Texas Tech for his success that he's having and the coaches that he played for. So I just think it teaches so much, but it's such a cool opportunity. It speaks volumes about the commitment of Adidas and Team Mahomes and to our athletes and to our programs. And it's not just the men's programs, which is really exciting.
It's great. I loved the way that you connected that back to loving your college or university experience as well. And that's definitely something we have to model nowadays for young people in this era. So that's just a brilliant connection there, Coach. Coach, this whole podcast, thank you so much for going deep with us, especially on the defensive stuff. I could see how you lit up and how excited you were to talk about it. So I have no doubt that it infuses your program as well. And we wish you all the best. But thank you so much for sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I can't believe it's already been an hour. I can talk for days on that. So
I
appreciate
love that part. Yeah.
Thank you. And I appreciate you just giving this exposure to our program because we're super proud of it and hope some people will to tune in and watch Lady Raiders play.